How do you get people to buy in? When you've got an idea, how do you inspire them?
So I love to come into situations wanting to benefit the other person, not necessarily myself.
What advice would you give to somebody that they're struggling to find motivation to work out and get in shape?
First of all, I think the motivation factor needs to leave.
What do you do on the days when it feels like everything hurts and I don't want to go? How do you break through those barriers to go and show up anyway to continue improving?
This is why I'm doing it. Those days where I don't want to show up and wake up for a 6 a.m. lift, a 6 a.m. CrossFit workout, a 7 a.m. CrossFit workout, I'm looking back and saying, what is my goal here?
How will people treat me differently if I'm a man and I become a nurse?
Like there's definitely men that are saying, I'd love to be in this role, but what am I gonna look like? Who are people gonna see me? It's like, what? I'm a nurse?
What made you want to become a male nurse?
So I want to be a nurse since I was probably second grade, and it's never left me. Because I just love people. I love the sequence of medicine. This stuff just makes sense. I'm even okay being a volunteer. I would do this anyways, because this is how much I care about helping people be well.
What would you do if you had a disagreement with someone and it was difficult to work with them? How would you make that situation work?
With a coworker in that situation, we have to be functional to be able to help this patient live.
Before we get started, I have a small favor to ask. If you haven't yet subscribed to this channel, then please go ahead and do that. It helps more than you know. Also, please leave me a comment. I will go through them and try to read and reply to as many of them as I can. If you have a question that you would like to ask a future speaker, leave it in the comments section. Thank you. Welcome to Kaizen Connection, where our mission is to turn your next challenge into the opportunity that changes everything. Welcome, Josiah.
Thank you so much. Glad to be here, man.
Josiah, what's good in your life right now? What's going on that you're excited about?
What's going on, man? Well, this summer's been great. Been able to have experience at an urgent care called Concentra down in Chicagoland, which has been just a blessing to get kind of my feet in the door of nursing and kind of experience what patient care looks like. Lots of fun with siblings being home from college has been great. Kind of embracing that time with parents too, and just being able to just spend more time with the people that I don't get to see on the regular basis with college. So that's been a scoop, man.
Sounds like you're in nursing school.
I am.
All right, very good.
Yeah.
What else are you working on that you're excited about?
Man, I am, there's many things. There's many things. In my life right now, kind of transition into kind of like working out in terms of a CrossFit way. So came kind of from a baseball background and now kind of easing into kind of more of like functional strength, which has been super fun. Kind of a challenge for myself. I've been a competitive guy for a long time, but to kind of use it in a different way has been super cool. So engaging in that, on top of that too, getting meals with guys that haven't got meals with and just kind of diving into who does Christ say that we are, and how can we continue to acknowledge each other, be accountable of each other, and continue to uplift each other in Christ.
Something that I've noticed about you in the brief time that I've known you is that you have a very powerful leadership personality. People seem to respond very well to you. And having a charisma that motivates people to do things is extremely influential in this world. So the first thing I wanted to ask you was, how do you get people to buy in? When you've got an idea, how do you inspire them?
Yeah. I think I kind of try to flip it on its head. People think like, oh, you have to come in this kind of a high power distance position. I think I actually transitioned to more of a low power distance where I can just be their friend first. I think that's what it takes. The relationship, the connection, that's how you're going to build people's trust. No, you're not in it for yourself, you're in it for them. And there's true just intention there. There's intentionality. There's purpose in what you're doing. So I love to come into situations, whatever it is, and say, you know what, I'm coming to the situation wanting to benefit the other person, not necessarily myself. And in doing that, I can therefore engage in whatever conversation, whatever challenge we're going to be going into, hard trial, joyful trial, whatever it is, together. And it's kind of a humble mindset in that way.
How do you show them that you're their friend?
That's a good question. Living life with them, doing life with them. It's not a quick fix. It's not a quick thing. You can't go into a room and say, oh, I want to meet this person. You meet that person, and instantly you say we've become the best of friends. It's a journey. Life is a journey. We all know that. Well, just because of the relationships we had in the past, relationships we have now, and that are to come in the future that only God knows, right? But it's the importance of just living life with that individual really allows us to, therefore, allow them to come in and be their friend.
Well, I have a friend that doesn't interact in as many circles as often, but when he comes out, people come out of the woodwork. Man, you're back. Where have you been?
Yeah.
What does it take to build that kind of relationship that when you're gone, someone will miss you because they miss the influence and the impact that they've had on your life? How do you show somebody how much you care about them when you're with them?
Yeah. It's important to be vulnerable. I think that's just a lost art in this world, especially for men. Just like this concept of vulnerability is huge. And if we're able to get vulnerable with people that we trust and almost take risks and say, this person might not even keep their word, but I want to be honest, I want to be transparent with them, because maybe, just maybe, they're able to see that and understand that I want to go deeper. And in going with deeper connection, you're able to therefore build into different things. You're able to therefore build into different relationships that will proceed and that will hopefully extinguish the fire of I'm gone for 1 minute and I'm back the next. It can keep a consistent route. And that's where accountability comes into with that step of just vulnerability, I think is huge.
Yeah, it's an interesting concept to me that men should be vulnerable. And I think it's a double-edged sword because on the one hand, I think a lot of women will say that they want a vulnerable man. And then if you get up to them in some other context, a lot of women will tell you, what I want is a manly man. I'm tired of this vulnerability. And I don't think that's the reality that we're seeing. I think what people are saying is, I want vulnerability. I want you to show me parts of yourself that aren't hard, that aren't rigid. But I don't necessarily want to know your worst nightmares and your deepest secrets, at least not early on. Because I think when you show someone that you're vulnerable, it can look like a lot of different things. And I think it's important to make a distinction that vulnerability doesn't necessarily imply that you're asking them to carry a weight. And I think, at least in my experience, that is where people start to get mixed up. And what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it's real, and I think it's huge. You're allowing yourself to go in too far, and you're saying, you're laying on burdens to somebody else, and you're unintentionally having them carry your cause, right? That's just like it goes deeper. It goes deeper, and I think what you said is perfect. Of saying new relationships, new friendships, new partnerships, like whatever it looks like, it's important to build trust. The trust factor is huge. But once you reach that point, I think the next step is that vulnerable piece of saying, this is my life. This is who I really am. Because to be confident in yourself is to understand who God has called you to be, right? So in doing that, we're able to say, look who I am, and look who I am in God's eyes. And this is truly who I am. And if they can't acknowledge that or know that, if you're talking about a dating relationship, person that might not be right for you. Yeah. There's trains, and there's different types of pathways too in terms of how it flows.
That was an interesting way to get into this. I'm trying to find the right example. I think what I'm trying to say is there's a way to be vulnerable without giving up being somebody that's a source of strength for somebody else, if that makes sense. Yeah. I think that the most inspiring and influential people that I know are both vulnerable, but they're also steadfast. Yeah. They've got a way that they can be vulnerable without being somebody that's needy. They can be vulnerable without being somebody that's taking more than they're giving. They're vulnerable in a way that helps other people open up to them, if that makes sense. And I think that's what I'm trying to get to. What are some specific examples of the ways that you're thinking of how vulnerability works with people?
I was an RA this past year at Bethel. And I was able to see a lot in the eyes of my residents. And what's super cool about that is I was in a peer-to-peer relationship. So I'm not this shepherd that's like guiding the flock, right? I'm like a sheepdog running alongside. Reference to my RD who kind of brought that up to me, one of my RDs that brought up to me. Just this concept of I'm walking in step with who God has called me to be, right? And in that, I get to meet people where they are. So example here, a good baseball friend. I was in a baseball team at Bethel my freshman year. And he was my resident in my second year as I stopped playing baseball to continue to pursue nursing. And he came up to me and said, Joe, I'm not experiencing playing time. I'm not experiencing these things. I was able to sit with him and understand that. He's opened up to me, who's not on the team anymore, but was a teammate that fought hard, that tried to give his best at practice, that tried to give his best whenever game he got in, right? And I got a guy who's a really great baseball player come to me and saying, Josiah, how would you mentally deal with this? I'm thinking about going to a different school and whatever else too. I'm just like sitting with it. I'm just like, man, first of all, thank you for opening up to me. You didn't need to say this at all. You trust me enough to do that. I'm your RA, dude. Like, it's a different level there. And at the end of all this too, he's just saying, Joe, like, I want to get closer to Jesus. I think that's a source of peace, and that's where I want to end up is heavenward. So just like the concept of saying, if we can present ourselves as somebody who's like not trying to take the high road, and looking at Jesus as like kind of this suffering servant piece of how he came down to walk with us. He was strength. He was the greatest leader of all time. He is the example that we are to follow. But in that we say, look at Jesus' strength, but look at also the way he washed the disciples' feet. Like, what a transition. And how can we live up to that? Practical examples like that. of just sitting, of listening. We feel like we don't count listening as kind of like a strength, but it's so powerful. This person cares enough to sit and listen to my hardship, and we don't have to take it on. We have to take on the burden. We can say, man, let's give this to God right now. We don't need to carry. We're called not to carry it on our own. We can let it to the Father. So that's an example right there of just kind of coming from a place of, I was with this guy on a team. I'm off the team. We're in a different circle. There could be a non-respect here. They could be taking advantage of me. But no, there's respect. And there's vulnerability. There's the ability to take down and say, you know what? This is what's going on. Joe, how can you help me process through this? And I get to point him to Jesus. That's an example.
That's great. Thank you. And thanks for the clarification, because that was what I was trying to get to, is figure out if you're somebody that charisma comes naturally to, you're very good at making a connection with people. I think that sometimes those subtle distinctions might be more elusive to somebody that doesn't come nearly as naturally to.
Right.
But I'm curious, what would you do if you had a disagreement with someone and it was difficult to work with them? How would you make that situation work?
It goes back to kind of taking the humble road. We're both in this game. We're both in this career to help patients. We're both in this career to put patients first, to see them get well, to reach them in a medical way, right? And as a believer, we can reach their soul too, if there presents an opportunity. But if I'm in a disagreement with a coworker, with a patient, whatever it is, I need to step back and analyze. There's so much power in taking a bird's eye view of let's look at a situation. Where am I wrong? If I'm wrong, where am I wrong? Where am I disagreeing? And what are this person's strengths? If it's a patient, it's probably tougher. You're getting them that night, that day, you may be having for a week, but there's some friction there. They don't like you. And you're going to get people like that. That's guaranteed. Not everybody's going to acknowledge who you are. If maybe because you're a male, or maybe it's because you talk a certain way, your characteristics, your mannerisms, like it doesn't matter. There's going to be friction at some point in your career, right? So to acknowledge that, to say this is a thing, and to say, how can I come down to this person's level and try to associate, try to kind of understand where are they coming from. Let's hear them out. And how can I therefore input? With a coworker in that situation, we have to be functional, be able to help this patient live, right? If this is a life or death situation. If we're coming to, and then we're at ER, we're ER nurses, and we're coming to a bed where this person is on cardiac arrest, and this person doesn't agree with the method that I'm doing, right? Or we can't agree on the drip, whatever else it is. We have to be functional together to be able to help the patient. It doesn't become about us, it becomes about them. I feel like when we get to understanding how can I how can I do this well? How can they, they're okay, but how can they do this well? There becomes that tension, but if we acknowledge that this is not about us, this is about how can we help the patient out, we get to take a step back and say, okay, we're on the same team too. We're on the same team. So it's inwardly looking at yourself first. It's tough. Like, that's not easy. The first thing we want to do is say that we're right. We went to school for how long? We've done these many clinicals. We've done this many rotations. I'm only halfway through it, so I don't know half the things I need to know, right? But it's just acknowledging, saying, you know what? Let me just think about it. Let me not crash out and think about how I'm doing something wrong or how they're doing something wrong. But let's try to get on the same page here and analyze. Let's try to do this for the patient, not for our own benefit.
Yeah, that's really good. I like that. Thank you. So in the context of being an RA, what if you had a situation where somebody comes to you and it's the same repeat offense over and over again? Not necessarily something terrible, but something that you've told them repeatedly. This is not acceptable. This is not something that we do. How would you manage that situation?
Yeah. If it's an over and over pattern, and by God's grace, I haven't had to deal with this to that extent, but that's something we train for in RA training, of just like there's a repeated offense that goes against our curriculum, our values, our covenant as a university. And we get to look at that and say, I would probably bring this up to an RD, somebody that's of a high, this person has been continually disobeying the rules. And this is not, say they're drinking on a dry campus, right? And this is a continuous thing. I've told them to stop. We've had to report them because it's part of our thing, but they just won't. It becomes out of my jurisdiction. It becomes onto the RD to say, what should I do in a situation? To again take the low road. We're taking the low. We're submitting under. So easy is for us to say, just don't do it again, bro. That's bending the rules a little bit though. Like, we don't want to be doing that. We want to come to a position where we're saying, let's humbly come down our leader and say, how can we really help with this resident that's struggling right now? And maybe there's a deeper issue. Maybe they're not responding to us, but there's something else in their life that's going on. that benefit of the doubt thing is a tricky rope, because if we let it go too long, we're never going to get it back. Like that's kind of the play that we're playing with, you know? So I think for myself, I'm going to get in repeated offense. I'm taking this to my guy that's going to be more of a guy or gal that's going to be more in that leadership position over me. And I'm saying, how would you address this situation? So I have wisdom, and hopefully it's Christ-centered into how can I come to this resident and say, what you're doing is wrong, man. I'm going to have to do this, but I want to hear, or even starting with, I want to hear what's going on in your life, man. Like, why is this a repeated offense? Why is this a repeated thing? You know, so that's kind of how it's tough. But how would I come about that? It's come situation to situation. You know, how much rope am I giving, and how much do I need to pull back?
Yeah, it is a tough thing to balance, and it's great that you have higher leadership to appeal to in that kind of situation.
Yeah, right.
Well, I mean, I've heard this talked about in the context of teams. I mean, if you have a great team, the way you want to build your team is try to figure out what your strengths and weaknesses are. Use all of the assets that you've got. You want to groom the people as much as you can, because good people are hard to find, so you don't want to let them go. But the reality is, if you want the team to succeed, sometimes the only option that you have is to take somebody off the team because it's not working out. And at least that's what it kind of sounded like when you're appealing to an higher authority. I've exhausted every solution that I've got available, so now I've got to resort to something that's higher. But that is what a good leader has to do. And that, I think, is one of the hardest parts, is knowing when to make those decisions. If you've got too little sympathy, you fail because you've hurt the person and it wasn't a reasonable action to take.
Yeah.
If you're too compassionate, then you run the risk of putting everybody else in a bad situation because you haven't addressed the problem adequately.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to somebody that they're struggling to find motivation to work out and get in shape?
First of all, I think the motivation factor needs to leave, because it's not about that. It's about discipline. Motivation will come. I get motivated every day to do what I need to do, right? For one simple task, and then the motivation fades. I think it comes to a concept of consistent discipline. What are your goals? What are you trying to achieve? What are you trying to do, right? That's what it comes down to, I think, first and foremost. And as we get to understand that, we get to say, how can we make a plan to achieve those goals? Because you're motivated towards something. Are you motivated toward losing weight, getting abs? Like, are you motivated just to stay healthy? Stuff runs in your family, so you want to really kind of deny those trends and come into a point where you're healthy, be able to pass it on to your kids, whatever else too, right? What is the goal, and how can we make a step-by-step plan to get there? Now, this is tough for some people, because some people are like, I just watched this video, I'm fired up to go to the gym. Yeah, but how about next week? How about the week after that? Are you still going to be in that mindset? Is it a one-and-done type of thing? Or are you continuing to kind of come forward and continuing to do these things? But I think this concept of motivation is a fading thing. But it's how can we create discipline that is consistent, and then continue to develop into the shape, the form we want to get into.
Where would you advise someone to go if once they've got the plan,
Yeah.
the consistency,
Yeah.
and they're still struggling? Because some people have a hard time just getting off the couch, even though the plan is there and it's established, they know what to do. But how do they develop that discipline?
Yeah, it comes with community. I firmly believe we can't live the Christian walk alone, but we also can't live a life of gym going alone either. Like, this needs to be connected, and that's why CrossFit is so great, right? Because you're able to come into a community. This is not you alone. Yes, it can be you against you, right, in so many different areas, but also it comes into a concept of you are going against your peers, and you're able to help develop them, and it's tight-knit. It's like a team. You're working as a team, and that's the best way I feel to be able to get to your goals, to be able to get to the things you want to get to, because you're in that type of setting, right? You're in the development phase of saying, I wanted this at one point. I can't do it by myself. I need to connect with other people, and through that, they're uplifting you along the way. They're helping carry your burdens and helping encourage you. But it's important for support. You need support, 100%.
That makes a lot of sense to me, because I like going to the gym. But the problem I have is everyone at the gym is wearing AirPods. And to me, the gym used to be a place where I could go and there'd be some human interaction. Even when I was in college, people used AirPods some, but there were great people in the gym that I could use as a resource, like bodybuilders and physical therapy students. And sometimes people would come up to me and they would offer me advice on how to improve my form or meet my goals. But that's something that I've been struggling with lately. So it's interesting to me that CrossFit's different. So talk to me about CrossFit, because I don't have much experience with it.
Yeah. So I'm fairly into it too, which is great. Like, I've just saw kind of a little background. Was a baseball player kind of all through school. That's from middle school through, I was able to get recruited by God's grace and play in college for a year. So I'm coming from like a body kind of building type of mindset in terms of I'm building strength, and it's functional strength, right? I was a catcher, so I had to make sure my legs were strong, had to make sure upper body was strong to be able to just throw the ball fast and strong in all these categories, right? So I came from a kind of a weightlifting background of it was kind of consistent 4 to 5 days a week with lifting, hill workouts in there too. So I always kind of had this kind of like aerobic / cardio mindset because I needed to stay fit for the game, behind the dish, in a squatting position, in a kneeling position, throwing down whenever I need to. So it was a kind of a cool transition into CrossFit. I was like, this is a functional workout. And I went the first time, I definitely got humbled. Like, this is really tough. Like, we're rowing, we're pulling, we're snatching. Like, these are all movements I'm not used to. But everybody else around me is doing them. So you're humbled first, right? You're able to see, man, I'm not that good. But everybody starts there. Everybody starts at this point in life, you know what I mean? And you're seeing people that are middle-aged doing this stuff. And how motivating is that? You know, how much of a discipline do they have to create to be able to get to that point where they're snatching weight that's double their, double, or they're pulling up 50 times more than you would expect. You know, like it's insane to see. But this idea of CrossFit is a lot of aerobic training. So you're training your lungs to be able to kind of perform under high intense cardio workouts, right? That's the basis of it. You're kind of going in different stations. You could have like a calorie row where you're doing the rowing machine. You could transition that to like a box jump where you're jumping over a box for how many reps. You can transition to kind of a pull-up type deal. And this is kind of either like for the minute by the minute type of thing. So you're kind of going every minute by the minute. I guess it's called EMOM, or on the minute. And you're trying to go into that transition, or you're doing everything in 16 minutes. How many rounds can you get in of that exact thing? You're doing 18 calories on the rower. You're doing 10 box jumps. You're transitioning to 10 pull-ups, right? This is like a simple transition, right? How many can you get done in 16 minutes? You're fighting against yourself in that way. It's you against you, but also so you're seeing your teammates do the same exact thing, struggling in the same exact way, because it's going to hurt. It's going to start hurting after how many rounds you do, right? So it's just a fun, like you're feeling the workout at the end of it. You know what I mean? I feel like a lot of people can go into the gym, get a good pump in, you look big, you're coming out and not feeling anything. Or you're feeling something a day later, but you're tweak something, you know? CrossFit, you're feeling it right after. You're able to hydrate, get the nutrients you need, and you're feeling great and energized for the next day. So there's just so many, and I'm such a newbie to it. So I'm sure there will be critics talking about me on terms that he doesn't know what CrossFit is. But that's just a sequence. But it's such a community building thing that really helps bring people together for the love of just fitness and making sure our bodies are our temple.
If it was easy, everyone would be doing it.
Yeah.
But what is it that gets you through those barriers when everything's hard? I mean, doing college baseball is no joke either. There's a ton of commitment to show up and be a student and an athlete at the same time.
Yeah.
What do you do on the days when it feels like everything hurts and I don't want to go?
Yeah.
How do you break through those barriers to go and show up anyway to continue improving?
Yeah. Well, we remember that why, right? If we're basing a why off motivation, it's most likely kind of going to fade. But if we're basing a why off that discipline of like, this is why I'm doing this and this is my goal, man, it's a straight and narrow. I mean, it's a tough path, but it's straight and narrow. This is why I'm doing it. Those days where I don't want to show up and wake up for a 6 a.m. lift, a 6 a.m. CrossFit workout, a 7 a.m. CrossFit workout, I'm looking back and saying, what is my goal here? Am I trying to be functionally strong? Am I trying to do these things? Like, what is my goal? So it's just bouncing back to what we were talking about earlier. This sequence of discipline is like enormously huge.
And nursing takes a lot of discipline as well. So it's interesting that you're like, I mean, I'm a male nurse and you're looking to be a male nurse. Mm-hmm. So what made you want to become a male nurse?
Well, my mom, I'm sure you've had her on the podcast too before. She is a nurse at Rush Hospital in Chicago. And I've been able to, through her just influence of just saying how much she loves pouring into people and loving people, I've been able to kind of look at that and see that. Just her example of like being a charge nurse on general medicine floor and just look up to her in that way, very young. So I've wanted to be a nurse since I was probably second grade. And it's never left me because I just love people. I love the sequence of medicine. This stuff just makes sense. Some people, math just makes sense for them. That's not me. I'm a guy that loves to be hands-on, that loves to see people get better, loves to see people in their most vulnerable state. Maybe not the best day for them, but I get the part in their life where I get to help them out. It brings me so much joy to see them eventually get well, to see these things happen. Just these common principles, these core values of what you should have a nurse. Man, I respect that to the highest regard, So it's just been a consistent thing. And through college, I'm like, I love to be able to do baseball, but I love to be able to do both. So there was a motivation in both, right? And I was able to keep discipline in saying I'm doing baseball, but also too my main goal is this nursing career. So that was a transition too. But always, I mean, it's been since the youth, dude.
Did you ever feel weird at all about the position of being a nurse as a male? Because people call it a pink collar job, and I've seen this in actual, like, legit research study. They use that term. So I'm not just making stuff up here.
Right.
For me, it was an interesting position to be in, but I'm curious how you feel about it going through the process and starting it up a little bit later on than me.
Yeah, I mean, to give you perspective, my cohort is probably 45 females, and we have 7 guys. And there is maybe a little intimidation of saying we're coming into this thing with a female-dominated field. But there's so much value in that because you get to say, I have a part to play in this. I need them as much as they need me. There's a humility factor again. I feel like that's been the trend of humility, of just like there's a humility factor of saying, man, in this specific thing, I see your strengths in this, but also too, I see you relying on me for this. How could we create that balance? I see gender fluidity, how we can work together as a team, being both male, being both female, has been like just super cool to see. So I see that like there's a lot of stereotypical stuff at Bethel where I go to school of like, oh, like you're with all the girls, right? Like, yes, but also too, there's a lot of value in that. There's a lot of value in learning from them and kind of taking the humble road and not being prideful. This idea of a masculine man, dude, you get to be masculine as you're able to be vulnerable to your classmates, and what we just talked about earlier. Understand stress levels, understand faults, understand how to study with one another well. These are all development phases to be able to produce us as great nurses one day. So I found it very valuable, man. And people have different perspectives, of course, but I've just been able to see like there's such an upside to having a diverse community of both male and female and being able to take part in that. Just if I'm one man, to say I get to play part in that, what a blessing it is, man.
Yeah, for me, it's always been easier to function in mixed groups. I think if you get too much of either gender, sometimes things tend to get more polarized.
Yeah.
That's just been my experience. But I think that probably does come down to personality. But I wonder if there's males that would like to be nurses or would like to do something in healthcare, and that might honestly be the best option for them. They care about other people, or at least they have the potential to.
Yeah.
But I wonder if they're intimidated by that idea of how will people treat me differently if I'm a man and I become a nurse.
Yeah. That's 100% right. Like that's what it is. Like 100%. Like there's definitely men that are saying, I love to be in this role, but what am I going to look like? Who are people going to see me as? Like what? I'm nurse. Like what is this going to be? You know what I mean? And there's that. It's holding on to like their own ego. It's holding on. It's almost like a pride factor, of like, man, are people going to think less of me? Me going into this field? Like how will I react with this? You know what I mean? How will I be looked at? If you're so content on that, man, then yeah, you're not going to make it through. But the part to play is being so confident in who you are, and for myself, so confident in who God calls me to be that I can walk in any room and say, I'm called to be here. And I'm here on mission, on purpose, for the benefit of my patients. And even the benefit of my coworker that's so different from me, but we get to still walk the same walk. So fully agree with that, man.
Yeah, I like that. I think sometimes people think of nursing as, if I go into this field, people are going to think that I'm non-traditional gender role. And I don't know that that's true for everyone. It certainly wasn't for me, but when I went in, I had people that told me, good for you for challenging the status quo. And my response was, I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing this because this is what I want to do. I want to help people, and this is a good job. And I think that I can be really valuable in this role. And while I was shadowing a nurse in the hospital, he was really great. He talked to a patient that she said something along the lines of, oh man, I got 2 male nurses tonight. He said, yes, ma'am, we were male nurses. You know, all nurses were male until Florence Nightingale stole it from us. Because if you look back to the pre-Florence Nightingale time, this is what monks in the Middle Ages were doing for centuries before Florence Nightingale. Yeah. So I think people tend to think of this type of service as a non-traditional masculine role. But if we look back in history, it kind of changes the narrative a little bit. And in some ways, that is kind of a non-traditional gender role, but how can it not be manly to protect, to serve, to heal?
I think of just like biblical roles and patterns too, of just looking at like the man as the protector of the house. Yeah. You know what I mean? And that's a biblical thing, and being the head of the household, and not in any way that's condemning to the wife, not in any way that's taking away the wife's identity. You know what I mean? But it's a way of saying, calling to step up. So I think men lack in the point of, and I hope I'm answering your question correctly, but they kind of lack in the point of saying, what I'm doing right now is truly for the benefit of who I'm working with. And if that is a sequence of compassion, that's a sequence of care, that's a sequence of strength and leadership. That's what's necessary in a nursing field. And you don't always get that from the opposite gender. You don't. It's just because we're operating, we're functioning in different ways. And that's totally fine. That's exactly how God made us to be. There's no cutting that, right? So the acknowledgement of saying this, we're different in these ways, and therefore we can go and work together because we are different, it solves a world of problems.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, men and women do bring different things to the table.
Yeah.
And I think both of those things can be incredibly valuable in the hospital.
100%.
A female nurse is going to approach a patient differently than I would, but not every patient is going to respond the same way to that kind of a care. I mean, somebody that's overly sympathetic might make the patient feel more vulnerable than they mean to. I think if I was a patient in the hospital and somebody communicated to me something that was supposed to be empathy and started to border on pity, I would feel a little bit patronized in that situation. And not everyone's going to feel that way. Some people do want to be treated in the sick role, I think. They want to be talked to like they're a baby bird, which is fine. But then I think there's also a lot of value in having somebody that comes in with a different kind of demeanor, and it's still very compassionate and caring. I know some nurses that have served in the military and then they become nurses later. And it's amazing to me that somebody that has that much confidence and almost hardness about them can communicate with somebody in a way that's still very great bedside manner. I think a lot of it has to do with the intentions of the person, and I think those come through even sometimes when somebody's got a little bit of a crusty exterior.
Yeah. I think that's real. I think who are you in character? Who are you in purpose? Like, it is, you're right. Like, are you here for the money? That's a big thing too. That's what we deal with in now generation of I'm chasing this because I'm chasing the bag. Okay, we got priorities messed up. This job is, and that's why we're probably losing people all the time. You know, in the fact of in the nursing field, if it doesn't work out for them this way, they're not getting as much as expected. I'm dipping out, or this is just too much, right? I thought this was just gonna be for the money, right? Like we have to analyze our purpose. We got to take a step back again and say, you know what? I'm walking in this patient's room. Am I here because I'm just going to kind of waste my time in a way as I clock in hours for $40 an hour? Or am I going to be here because I really want to see the patient get well? I'm even okay being a volunteer. I would do this anyways because this is how much I care about helping people be well, right? Like you said, purpose. What is your purpose in doing it? And I think that's something we all need to analyze, gender fluid, man and female, to what does this look like? What does this look like to be in that picture of purpose for your patient?
I think you need both, though. I think if the only reason I ever show up to work is because I'm passionate about it, that can create its own challenges because it's almost impossible, at least for me, to show up excited to work every single day. And I show up because I don't want to get in trouble because, I mean, of course I have to show up. It's a legitimate job. But I think sometimes we do things for a lot of different reasons.
Yeah.
But sometimes you start out to make money. And then you realize that there's more there, that I can have a purpose in this place as well. I can help people. I can inspire people. So I always wonder when people talk about you shouldn't go into nursing if all you're interested in is money, because I think some people are interested in money, but to me that's not a disqualifier. I think there can be growth along that journey, especially when you work in an environment where you have other great people that inspire you as well.
Yeah. It's key. And I think that's what you said about I don't want to show up to work every single day. I'm tired. Like my social battery's done. Yeah, it's going to be done. You're going to burn out probably. And you're going to feel like I can't see another patient today, man. This is my third 12-hour shift in a row. I'm so excited for the weekend. I'm so excited to be on that 4-day break, right? But we get to analyze and say, what is my intention in doing this, first of all? I'm able to help support my family with the paycheck that I'm getting, right? This is a big thing. It matters. But also, too, I'm getting to see sick people be well. You know, so analyzing that process of you're going to be mentally drained, and you're going to have days where it's not fun. You're going to have days where you mess up and you don't chart right, and days where you don't administer the right vaccine or put the right IV. Like, there's going to be days for all of that. So what happens when you then go into a scene of saying, I acknowledge that, but also there's so much growth in this field too, and I know I'm called to be here. So just remember that calling piece too.
Well, we're talking about pushing through barriers, right?
Yeah.
Because there are tough days in nursing. There's tough days working out. That doesn't mean we don't show up. And sometimes the motivation is purer than others, I think. Yeah. I think the problem is if I'm only motivation by emotions and what people might call pure goals, like I only live to serve other people. I don't know that that's realistic for everyone. But I wonder if that's something that our generation is struggling with a little bit, because I think a lot of people are interested in following their passion,
Right.
which is fine. But it's a little bit concerning to me that I see a lot of people following their passion and they choose to go into fields that don't produce any income. And I can appreciate that they followed their passion, but that doesn't change the fact that when we're having a conversation, they talk about how they would love to have a house, and I would love for them to have a house. But that's not something that comes easily. I mean, finances require effort and dedication and a lot of things that you don't want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of young men are struggling right now, which is what's inspiring to me, to see somebody that's young and interested in pursuing something that's impactful and meaningful, and also being a leader in your own community. What would you say to Generation Z to help them live better lives and pursue something that's going to be meaningful and impactful?
Yeah. Know your why. Why are you doing this in the first place? Are you doing this because your parents told you to jump into this field? Doing this because your parents told you to, oh, this is something you need to do? Are you peer pressured by friends? You're peer pressured by what social media says. Social media is such, I mean, that's a whole nother podcast. How has social media impacted our culture today? That's extensive to the max, right? Analyzing your life and saying, who am I really? Obviously, we know the source. The source of my strength, the source of your strength is Jesus Christ, right? That's who we root our life, and that's our identity, right? But for these people that aren't there yet, are we comparing ourselves to other people? Are we looking at social media for our validation? Are we looking at, man, I just want to make my parents proud? Are we looking at what's really going to help me progress in life and get me that house, get me a family that's well fed, well cared for, right? We have to analyze all these things. And I'm saying, remember why you're doing this. For yourself, to glorify your Heavenly Father. And you're not there yet. I encourage you to get there. But the process is, there's no need for comparison, no need to peer pressure yourself into any other situation. We do get one life. This is true. We get one life. And the way to use that, I pray, would be to benefit other people's. You know what I mean? And that can be that can be from a finance perspective. You can be a businessman. You can be a zookeeper. You can be a nurse, right? You can be a person that works in an aquarium. Like, there's so many various things. But I think that what are you personally feel like you're called into, and feel like what is your why, without letting other people dictate that for you, is so crucial in our generation today, because we're so overstimulated, pressured to be in other things. But who are you foundationally in? That's going to be what carries you through, and what truly allows you to feel true joy, right? Happiness goes and fades every other day, right? But joy in what you're doing, that can be found in above, and that can be found in pairing with that, and what your career goal and passion is.
What's the negative impact of social media?
It's a deep one, man. It's a deep one, man. I mean, comparison, I think is you can scroll on social media for 5 minutes to the people that you're doing that are living their best lives, and there's not a lot of realism within social media either, right? You're scrolling on social media, you're seeing people at their peak, and some literal peaks as people are on mountains, right? Like, just beautiful sunsets. People are living, they feel like, man, I want to be there, or I want to be like them. How do I get to be like them? Body image comes into play too, right? How can I get that fit? How can I be in that situation? And this is all happening in your head as you're scrolling through things, probably on your couch, right? Or in the car. But what it would look like for you to just turn off the noise, and just to say, this is who I am, and maybe I'm posting to create content that benefits other people, which is what you're doing with this podcast. Or maybe I'm doing this for myself, to say, man, I want people to look at me in this way. But there's so many negatives, man, with the process of it. But it's a tool that can be used for good. I do agree with that. It can be a tool that's used for good if used in the right way. But comparison, I think, is the biggest piece.
It's true. It's very easy to craft kind of a persona on
Yeah.
social media.
Yeah.
You just show the best pictures of things that you want people to see. What do you think the impact would be if people shared their struggles on social media?
Yeah, I feel like it's been like an ongoing discussion of, like, what does it look like to be like real on social media? Because you can also almost fall like into a pity card of, like, you're asking for, it's like a reverse psychology thing. Like, you're wanting more likes because you're going through the roughest period of your life. You're wanting more attention, right? Because I think it almost, if you're in a community that's strong, it can work. But I feel like it's almost really tough. Like, it's really tough to come onto a social media platform and post a real list of your life without the intent of people feeling sorry for you. Because you're craving attention both ways. You're craving that attention both ways.
Right. That same distinction we were making about vulnerability was the intention of being vulnerable with somebody is to show that, no, I'm not made of stone. But sometimes that manifests as something that can become addictive, where people, I think people experience this even with counselors. Like if you give too much of your struggles over and over again, there comes a point where you have diminishing returns, I believe. If you continue to share past the point where you've been listened to, now it's time to move on. But I think sometimes it's hard for people to get there, and it becomes addictive to go to higher and higher levels to get the same high of I've been heard, and then I have to share it in a more dramatic way to more people.
Yeah.
And that sounds like what you're saying with social media.
Right. That's exactly what I'm saying. And that's the pitfall of many people. And if they don't get the response they want, what happens? I fear for what happens, because it gets to a point of no return, right? You can't go back from that. And that's the unfortunate thing. So what can we do on social? We can promote things that are really going to help people. And we're not asking for likes, follows, or shares. That's not our intention. It's great to grow a platform and be able to mass produce it and say how many people can be encouraged by this. But that's not our root. Our root is to say, man, I want to reach one person today and say, how can they be impacted? How can they be changed by this specific podcast, this specific teaching, this even picture? How could it benefit them? And they can go from that and say, man, that really impacted me. There was nothing else that came out of that. But is that one thing that was able to then progress into something else?
And on that note, since we're discussing social media and the ways that people look good, because we don't see the side that's not fun to share.
Right.
What's something about you that you've struggled with people might not realize?
Yeah. I place a lot of identity in social media. Like that's the truth. So I was, a baseball player. That was kind of it was kind of rooted in who I was. Would post always highlights of who I was, but I was struggling looking at other guys doing better than me, and I wanted to say, how can I get better than them? It's got a lot of mental stress on myself when I'm just playing the game of catch, when I'm just like, how can I be the best baseball player I can be? It just wasn't good. It caused overthinking, caused anxiety, right? And I dictated all of my success on how many likes I got and how many views I got. It was a certain person that liked my stuff, that they had credibility, right? I'm overanalyzing these things. Right? I'm checking my phone every 30 seconds after I post a post. And I'm sure we all fall into that, but that's just what it was, and I found so much of my identity in the way that people viewed me that I couldn't be content on who God saw, who God sees that I am to this day, and who God saw that I was back then. So this contentment piece, it wasn't there. And I struggled heavily with that, man, to the point of I would delete a post if I didn't get enough likes, if I didn't get enough shares, didn't get enough responses to it. I would really overthink it and say, man, do people really just not like me anymore? Like, what is that concept, bro? And looking back, it sounds silly, but it's real. And people are stuck in that motion, saying, I want to get out of it. But dude, you're finding all your validation there, and nothing else is coming from the outside because you're not pouring into circles that are directly in front of you, that are real life circumstances that need to be faced and need to be approached. But found so much contentment in there, man. And by God's grace, there's backstory too. I have a TikTok account called Pastor Joe on there. And all I do is I post motivational quotes on there that help hopefully promote the gospel, and hopefully one person can be able to be reached by that. Even then, I struggle with it too. I was going back, and I try to delete the app as fast as I can after I post. I don't have social media on my phone myself either. I believe that can be a trap for doom scrolling, as people call these days, and everything else too, and can lead into various lustful sins as well. We're a generation that's also subject to that. So while I've kind of cut out social media of my life, I saw how it can be used as a tool also. But this contentment piece, man, has been huge for me in my own life.
Yeah. Well, I was watching an interview with an evolutionary biologist, and it was interesting to me because this person does not seem like somebody that's a person of faith, a Christian.
Yeah.
But he said something that was fascinating to me, that he told his kids, it's okay for you to do drugs. Don't do porn. I would rather see you doing drugs than doing porn, because it's the most destructive thing that you can do to your body. And I think that is one of the most destructive things that I see afflicting young men right now, to have access to that all the time.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting question, because I think a lot of young men get blamed for it, and maybe there is some blame to be had. It's hard to know whether or not to blame someone that's got an addiction to something, because they do own some of the responsibility for it. And if you take that responsibility away, you take away their ability to break themselves out of the addiction. The frustrating thing to me is it's everywhere.
Yeah.
It's fed to you by the time you're 12 years old.
Yeah.
And there's not a lot of great systems in place to protect young men that are below the age where they've got a lot of ability to understand the consequences of that.
Yeah.
What would you say to someone to protect them from that?
That's deep because it does come from all cylinders. It comes from all sides, and I think of like taking captive of your thoughts. Like that's such a big thing. Like the smallest thing that you think has no impact can be a trickling down effect to something that's greater. And I do agree that sin is sin, right? Right from a drug altering mind that changes your perception on how you see life, to a thing like porn and like that, all these things. Like a sin is sin to God, right? And these are all destructive things for the body. So that's where I differ with that evolutionary biologist. But I do agree in saying that there needs to be systems in place to say this is such a destructive thing in our society and men are so subject to it. How can we, as men, uplift each other and be accountable? We're going to go back to vulnerability because that's what it takes. This is a thing that can't be trapped within us, but it needs to be exposed. You need to expose your sin and flee from it. That's what the Bible calls us to do, right? But this concept of how do we protect and how do we like almost like heed people in, I feel like I've seen it often temporary. Like it's a temporary thing because you can't hold somebody in a shield forever. There's a place where they have to go and grow up and have to experience different things. But hopefully in their upbringing, you're talking young ages, right? We're able to create a foundation and perception of the world that exists in the concept of, I don't need this in my life. And this is no satisfaction to me. I don't find pleasure in this. This is not God's design, right? If we can craft young, if we can have fathers and mothers to come down to their children and say, this is the way to live. This is who God is calling you to be. I feel like we're able to execute a lot of just motivation, what we hear on the internet, what our friends say, and kind of walk a straight and narrow into who God has called us to be in that way. But it starts young. It starts in a foundational point, right? I mean, you think about like planting a seed. If you're planting a seed, and there's already stuff in the soil that's going to interact with it, the seed isn't going to be plentiful. You're not going to have a vine. You're not going to have a flower. You're not going to have something that produces life. But if we're nurturing, if we're putting it in solid soil, right? We're thinking about the parable of the sower. If we're planting these seeds in here they're among good ground and foundation, we're set up for success. We're set up for the fleeing mindset, right? We're protected before we even thought about protection. Like that's the concept. So I agree with you in that way, and I think the foundation is key. What is our foundation? Where are we going to be? Because we're going to hear things all the time. Like it's inevitable. It's inevitable. But if our foundation is strong and solid in who God says that we are, and our foundation outward too with our family, we're able to then go forth and hopefully not seek those things.
That's really good. You seem like you have so much positivity about you, and I don't think I've ever seen you upset or negative. Not that I've been with you that much, but during the interview, that's the impression I see of you. And I'm curious, have you ever gone through a time of your life when it was difficult to smile? Something hard happened, or something just wasn't right?
Yeah. I think about the transition from high school to college, and overthinking was my mantra. Like I would overthink in everything. It specifically came down to baseball, and that I just wasn't good enough. I went through the yips really bad the end of my senior year because I wasn't chosen to play on the team, right? And I was on the varsity team, but again, a lot of play time, as I think a lot of cases for a lot of kids. And that, I put in the face that I was good, that I was okay. I came to a summer of before college where I was just in desperation mode of just saying, man, I'm not where I need to be. And this bled into the beginning of fall ball for me in college. Just constant overthinking, constant overanalyzing, and not content in the deeper version of who Josiah really is, right? And I believe my joy comes from Jesus in the midst of those trials. There were pockets of joy, of course, but my identity was in a different place. My identity was in success with baseball. My identity was in success with friends, with relationships, right? It wasn't in success in who God is calling me to be, right? Jesus was more of a checklist item than he was a consistent daily bread. So that was the time of my life, specifically that's end of senior year into college, where I was in an overthinking state, an anxiety state for a game like baseball, but it affected every part of my life in reality.
What scares you?
That's a good question. I think at this point in time in my life, I'm feeding a family right now. I have two siblings, and while they have a concept of who God is, they have a concept of what he brings to the day. They've been taught it their whole life, just like me. We've been in the same rooms my whole life, right? Not seeing them come to know who Jesus is for themselves and to walk in that light. And to not have the opportunity to see it, to understand it, to be fed it, but to not acknowledge it and therefore not accept Christ in their lifetime. It's definitely one of my biggest, and I mean, this is me trying to pour into people, right? And this is me trying to be a big brother to pour into my siblings. That's a fear. Is that really going to happen? Are they going to be able to, what can I do? There's minimum to what Josiah can do, but there's a lot that God can do. So there's the process of trust too. But that's something that really is, as of recent, and being an older brother, scares me, man.
Something everyone has to come to terms with eventually is that they're going to be out of control at some point.
Yeah.
You can be richest person on the planet, best athlete. You feel so much control. And in some ways, I think it's harder for them when push comes to shove because they will be powerless at some point. If they're in control their entire life, then they're going to die. And that is a scary thought to me, to be out of control at that point, that they've been in control in their whole lives and they're not ready to receive help. Because I do believe that you're right. God always opens up the door and gives the opportunity for mercy and forgiveness. But if somebody is addicted to the control, the ability that they have because they've had so much power, they wielded so much control during their life, that's going to make it tough for them to accept that help.
Yeah, it's process of surrender. And I love that we're getting into this because this has been my root. The transition from getting out of baseball, I was able to play my freshman year of baseball by God's grace, and then kind of a bullpen catcher guy, and felt that, like I said, it was overtaking my mind. It was the thing that constant overthinking. I'm kind of like, why am I still in this? If this is leading me by a path of taking me out of the things that I really want to do, taking me out of ministry and being maybe an RA, being in music ministry, things that I can help develop and are fun, and I find joy in these things, and it's really helping build the kingdom, right? And taking me out of a circle of playing a game that's just consuming my mind. So there was this concept of surrender that came to my mind, and that is the hardest thing to do. That is one of the hardest things to do, is this concept of giving up control, letting go of the rope and trusting that God will catch you, right? And trusting God in that way. But that was my thing, and if you don't mind, I'm gonna share a verse real quick.
Absolutely.
Hold up. So we talked about this, Matthew 16, verse 24, which discusses, then Jesus said to his disciples, if anyone wants to come to me, he must deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. For who wants to save his life will lose it, but whoever wants to lose his life because of me will find it. This is a give or take, right? Like we're denying our own self. We're denying the control that we have to say, God, your purpose is so much better for my life. And it's the pinnacle, right? And in that, we get to say we can find our life in that, right? People always have those quotes of like, there's so much life, but are you really living it? There's some truth to that, because we're living a life, right? That is our own control and our own mantra. But how can we jump into saying, I actually kind of have to lose my own control to say, let God take over and let him lead me in the ways that he wants to lead me. That's what I had to do. I'll give you an example here too that's super easy to understand. You're in a car, right? Somebody's at the wheel. You're at the wheel. Somebody's beside you. That person is Jesus beside you. It's like, God, can I just take the keys for a little bit? Let me help you out. You're struggling. It's nighttime. You can't even see. Your headlights don't work, right? Your vision's bad. And like, no, I got it. And I like, back up. I got it. I get it now. I understand. And then you crash. You're continuing to go, but you just can't see whatever else happens. And Jesus is in there. I was with you the whole time. You just had to give up control. And I had to come to a point where I said, God, I'm going to hand you the keys now, and you can take control. That's a practical example of saying it can be so simple like that, but there's so much you have to give up in yourself to say, God, all I want is you, and everything else can go. But it's so tough for us. We can talk about this whole conversation of our own pride, our own identity, our own vulnerability. Do we want to give that up?
On this podcast, we have a closing tradition where the guest answers a question fielded by the audience and selected by the previous speaker. The question that has been left for you is, what is something you realized you were more capable of than you thought after you tried it?
I've never been a risk taker in my life, really. Like, I've never taken, like, this can come to like a funny example of like going skiing for the first time and like me never being that type of guy, right? But also just the risk of going into a room where I thought I didn't belong, going into a circumstance as an RA where I thought I just didn't fit in, but God used it. And God said, I'm gonna place you here in a situation where this kid is nothing like you, bro. but you're still going to be used, and I'm still going to help you continue to help this kid's life out, or help this walk with this brother, be humble in this way. So the capability came in my incapability of saying, I don't know like this. I don't think I can do this, but it's not about me. It's not about what I can do. So there's that kind of fun example, practical, of like taking risks, right? But that applies to a real life example too, of I can't do it on my own anymore. And I need to understand that my intention is not for myself, but my intention is to help other people. And that's the example of walking into rooms I don't feel like I belong in. So I guess that's the brief to that question.
So when you took the chance,
Yeah.
you didn't regret it. You were shown that the risk was worth taking.
Yeah.
And I think that's what a lot of people experience is they think that they're not good enough for something. But they don't have to be good enough for something. They just have to be good enough to take the first step. And then God takes them on a journey and they get better. And if they'd known how hard the journey was going to be, they never would have started. But when they take the first step, they've committed themselves and they're stuck.
Yeah.
So they have to see the journey through.
Yeah. And that's huge. And I think that's a big piece of it too. Of just saying we're counting ourselves out before we even begin the race. You know what I mean? We're at the starting line, and we're saying, man, that finish looks great, but I can't even see it right now. Like, what's the point right now? Like, I'm with all these people. They're probably better than me. They're probably going to run past me. I don't know if I've trained enough, whatever. What does it take to just run a mile? By the time you do that, you got so many people around you. You can't stop. We're going to keep on going. You keep on going for those 20 plus for a marathon, right? And you get to that finish line and you say, wow, that was a risk worth taking, because I was able to be alive in that and understand what a significant path it was. Because you can look back and say, man, I was carried all the way through that, right? So those are the practical examples, man. But I fully agree with that. We count ourselves out way too early. What does it take for you to say, I'm the step in truth and what God has called me into? And trust it, and trust that process.
Well, thank you for coming, Josiah. This has been awesome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely.